Podkast, a 100-year-old secret to long life. What if I told you that over 100 years ago, people believed they had already discovered the secret to living past 120? Not in a lab, not in a pill, but in something surprisingly simple: fermented milk. Scientists, doctors, and even Nobel Prize winners once claimed that tiny bacteria living in sour milk could slow aging, prevent disease, and dramatically extend human life. Sounds ridiculous today, or does it? In this episode, we're diving into one of the strangest and most fascinating longevity theories ever created, exploring where it came from, why people believed it, and what modern science says about it now. This is Podkast, a 100-year-old secret to long life.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to time travel.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
I want you to picture the year 1911. The world is on the brink of, well, massive change. Industrialization is roaring, but in the corners of the scientific world, there's this quiet revolution happening. And it's focused on a question that I think we are arguably even more obsessed with today than they were back then.
The question of how to stop the clock?
Yeah.
The eternal quest for longevity?
Exactly. Living forever, or at least living a very, very long time. We're diving into a book published in 1911 called The Bacillus of Long Life by a man named Loudon M. Douglas.
Right.
And the reason I wanted to pull this one off the shelf is that it feels like,
Yeah.
like the patient zero of the modern wellness and probiotic movement.
It really is. It's this fascinating collision point in history. I mean, on one hand, you have these ancient peasant traditions that have been going on for thousands of years.
Right. In the Balkans, the Middle East, the steppes.
Exactly. And on the other hand, you have the brand new cutting-edge science of microbiology.
Microscopes, petri dishes, the Pasteur Institute.
All of it.
Yeah.
And this book, it just captures that specific moment when all this ancient folklore crashed right into the laboratory.
And the central promise of this book is, well, it's pretty bold. Douglas isn't talking about genetic engineering or pharmaceuticals. He's not talking about cryogenic freezing.
No.
He is arguing that the secret to living past 100, and crucially, being healthy and active while you do it, is sitting in a very specific type of food.
A food that, ironically, most people in the West at that time viewed with a lot of suspicion.
Oh, absolutely. They considered it spoiled.
Or at least, spoiled, off.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack Douglas's argument in its entirety. We are going to explore the historical, the chemical, and the bacteriological arguments that fermented milk, specifically soured milk, is the key to extreme old age.
Then we are going to unpack what was known as the Metchnikoff theory, which is the prevailing scientific explanation for aging at the time.
And we have to decide by the end of this if we should all be fermenting milk in our cupboards with night lights.
Spoiler alert, I've already looked up yogurt makers on Amazon.
Me too.
Ah!
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Douglas starts this book with a hook that is just irresistible. He doesn't start with dry statistics.
No, he starts with a person.
He introduces us to a woman named Baba Vasilka.
Yes, Baba Vasilka. She is the anchor for his entire thesis. She's a Bulgarian peasant woman living in a tiny village called Smolchan.
Okay.
Now, you have to keep in mind, records were a bit spotty back then, but at the time Douglas is writing this in 1911, she is cited as being 126 years old.
126. That is, that's
Yeah.
hard to compute.
Yeah.
Even today, with all our modern medicine, hitting 100 is a feat.
A huge feat.
Hitting 126 is almost mythical.
It is. But Douglas emphasizes that the number isn't the most important part. It's her condition. You have to compare this to the Western experience of aging in 1911. In London or New York, if you made it to 70 or 80, you were likely expected to be in a state of decay.
Bedridden, senile, physically broken.
Right. The expectation was a slow, painful decline.
Exactly.
But Baba Vasilka, she's described as being active, she's performing duties, she is lucid, she isn't just alive, she's living.
And the kicker is that she isn't an anomaly in her own house.
No, she's not.
Her son is there too, right?
Yes, her son, Tudor. He is also alive and kicking at the sprightly age of 101.
That is just an incredible image. A 101-year-old man who is still the kid in the house because his mom is 126.
I know.
So naturally, Douglas, and really anyone reading this, has to ask, how? What are they doing? Is it the air? Is it the water? What is the secret?
And Douglas asks them, and the people themselves are very clear about it. They don't attribute their age to the mountain air or their genetics.
Right.
No, they attribute it to their principal food. They didn't eat rich, complex diets like the French or the English. Their staple, day in and day out, was soured milk.
It sets a really interesting tone for the book, doesn't it? It feels like part travelogue, part anthropological study, and then suddenly it turns into this microbiological detective story.
It really does. Douglas is essentially looking for the blue zones of 1911.
He is. We use that term today for places like Okinawa or Sardinia.
Right.
But Douglas identifies the eastern part of southern Europe, the Balkans, Bulgaria, parts of Turkey, as the blue zone of his day.
And he presents some staggering statistics. He claims that in a population of about 3 million people in that region, there were over 3,000 centenarians.
3,000. In a population of 3 million, that is a massive number.
It's a ratio about 1 in 1,000.
And how did that compare to the West?
It wasn't even close. He contrasts this sharply with what he calls Western ignorance regarding diet. He paints a picture of the Western nations, Britain, Germany, America, where mental decay and physical decline were just expected.
It was inevitable.
The West accepted senility as inevitable. The East, according to Douglas, had found a way to postpone it indefinitely.
And the culprit, or rather the savior, is this distinction he makes between fresh milk and soured milk. This was one of the first things that really jumped out at me.
Oh, me too.
Growing up, the image of health was a cold glass of fresh white milk. But Douglas argues that drinking fresh milk is actually historically weird.
It is weird in the context of human history, particularly in warm climates. You have to remember, for most of human history, refrigeration did not exist.
Right.
Douglas points out that in the East, he lists Bulgaria, Turkey, Arabia fresh milk is almost never drunk.
He even says the Bedouins considered it unwholesome.
Unwholesome is a polite way of saying dangerous. In a hot climate, fresh milk goes bad instantly. It spoils. And spoilage usually implies rot putrefactive bacteria that can make you sick.
Right.
But if you control that spoilage, if you guide it with the right bacteria, it turns into curds, butter, or fermented beverages like leaven or yogurt. It becomes stable. It becomes food.
There is that fascinating bit about the Bible he mentions. I had never noticed this before, but it makes so much sense when you hear it.
It's a subtle theological and anthropological point, but it's brilliant. Douglas notes that milk was absent from Hebrew sacred offerings at the altar.
Right. You offer wine, you offer meat, you offer grain, you offer oil. But why not milk?
Yeah, especially since it's the land of milk and honey.
Exactly.
But Douglas cites scholars of the time who argue that in the hot climate of the Holy Land, milk soured immediately. Soured was its standard state. And in the religious context of the time, ferments or leavened items were often excluded from the altar.
Okay.
So the milk in Milk and Honey was almost certainly a form of yogurt or sour milk.
That changes the mental image completely.
Yeah.
It suggests that this relationship with fermented dairy isn't just a fad, it's ancient.
Yeah.
It's foundational to survival in these regions.
It is. And Douglas wants to show that this food isn't just about nutrition. It was viewed as having medicinal, almost magical properties. There is this incredible anecdote he tells.
Oh, the Pass of Bukova.
Yes.
This was my favorite part. It felt like an action movie scene.
It is incredibly dramatic. It takes place during the Revolution of 1904. You have a group of Turkish soldiers traversing this mountain pass. They are tired. They are thirsty.
Okay.
They stop at a small Khan inn, and the keeper is a Bulgarian.
And obviously there's some political tensions there.
To put it mildly, the keeper gives them coffee, but he decides to strike a blow for the revolution, so he poisons the coffee.
A little biological warfare of his own.
Precisely. So the soldiers drink the coffee, get back on their horses, and head out into the pass. And pretty soon, the poison starts to take effect.
Oh, no.
They are in agony. They realize they're dying.
So they are stuck in a mountain pass, miles from help, literally dying of poison.
But as luck or perhaps a destiny would have it, a peasant comes down the pass leading horses loaded with panniers of yogurt.
The cavalry arrives, but instead of guns, they have bacterial cultures.
I love that, yes. The soldiers, presumably in desperation or perhaps knowing the local folklore that sour milk is a purifier, they seize the yogurt.
And they just eat it.
Douglas says they ate freely of it. And the claim in the text is that it counteracted the poison. They survived.
That is a wild claim. I mean, chemically, I don't know if yogurt is a universal antidote,
Probably not.
But it illustrates the near magical status this food held.
It does. It shows that in the popular imagination of that region, sour milk was a purifier. It was something that could neutralize toxins. And that idea, neutralizing toxins, is going to become the core scientific argument we discuss later with the Metchnikoff theory.
Right, right. But before we get to the science, though, I want to look at the menu Douglas provides. He doesn't just talk about yogurt. He takes us on a world tour of fermented milks.
He does.
We mentioned the Bedouins earlier.
Yes. The Arab or Bedouin method for making lebanon is fascinatingly primitive, yet so effective. They use skins, goat skins or sheep skins, to hold the milk. And the key is they never wash them out completely.
Which sounds pretty gross to modern ears.
It does, but it's brilliant. They leave the clots from the previous batch stuck to the inside, so the bag itself becomes the starter culture.
A perpetual fermentation machine.
Exactly. You pour fresh milk in, shake it up in this skin that is teeming with active bacteria from the last batch, and you get leaven.
But then he takes us way, way north to Lapland. And this is the one that really surprised me. I don't associate reindeer with dairy farming.
No, it's a unique adaptation to an extreme environment. The Laplanders use reindeer milk, which is incredibly rich and fatty. In the summer, they boil it with sorrel, a sour herb.
Okay.
But in the winter, the preservation method changes. They freeze it.
But not just in blocks of ice. It's more complicated than that.
No, not at all. They put the milk, often mixed with cranberries, into reindeer paunches, the stomachs, and let it freeze solid.
Wow.
Douglas describes this as ice cream in the greatest perfection.
Reindeer stomach cranberry ice cream. I'm not sure if Ben & Jerry's is going to jump on that flavor.
It sounds like a delicacy, doesn't it? But he does add a warning. He says it is so cold, so rich, and so frozen that it freezes the mouth violently. You have to be tough to eat it.
So not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. But again, it shows this universal human ingenuity.
Yeah.
How do we take this perishable nutrient milk and make it last?
So we have the Lebanon of the desert, the reindeer milk of the Arctic. But then Douglas dedicates a significant chunk of the book to what he seems to consider the heavy hitters, the champagne of milks.
Yeah.
We are talking about kumis and kefir.
These are the heavy hitters because they add another element to the mix, alcohol.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Milk that gets you tipsy.
Mildly, yes. Kumis is the drink of the nomads of the steppes, the Tartars, the Kyrgyz, the Bashkirs. It's made from mare's milk.
Why mare's milk specifically? Why not cow?
Well, mare's milk has a different chemical composition than cow's milk. It is significantly richer in sugar in lactose.
Oh.
And when you have more sugar and you introduce the right yeasts along with the bacteria, you get a vigorous fermentation that produces alcohol and a lot of carbon dioxide gas. Douglas calls it vinous fermentation.
So it's bubbly and boozy.
And it is the fuel of the steppe. He describes the nomads consuming enormous quantities of this stuff. It is their primary food while they are roaming.
Wow.
But they didn't just drink it as a mild beer, they actually distilled it.
This was the part that blew my mind. They built stills out of mud.
A primitive, still made of mud and cane. They would take this fermented kumis, boil it, capture the vapor, and create a brandy called rack or raki. It's a spirit made entirely from milk.
That's incredible. And there is a ritual attached to it, right? It wasn't just about getting drunk?
No, not at all. Douglas describes a first drop ceremony. The distiller, often a woman in the tribe, would take the very first drop of the distilled spirit coming out of the still and scatter it to their god. It's a moment of gratitude for this transformation of milk into spirit.
It really highlights how central this was to their culture. It wasn't just lunch. It was spiritual.
Exactly.
Now, kumis is the drink of the open plains.
Yeah.
But kefir. Kefir comes from the mountains, specifically the Caucasus.
Kefir is mysterious. Douglas talks about the kefir grains. If you ever made kefir at home, you know they look like little cauliflower florets or popcorn.
Right.
But in 1911 and for centuries prior, these grains were treated like diamonds.
He mentions the myth that they were a gift from Allah.
A gift to a preferred tribe, and there was a strict code of secrecy. The grains were handed down in families and hidden from strangers. They believed if the secret got out, the grains would lose their power and die.
And the preparation method for kefir is active.
To say the least, historically it was made in leather bottles, but unlike the Bedouin method of just shaking it, the kefir in the mountains needed constant agitation to keep the fermentation active.
To stop the curds from clumping too hard.
Right. And there is a legend, Douglas cites, that they would leave the leather bottles by the door of the house.
So you literally kick the milk on your way in.
Exactly. Passers-by were expected to give the bottle a kick to mix the contents. It's a community fermentation project.
That is brilliant. Honey, I'm home. Kick. So we have these ancient traditions. We have people living to 126. We have soldiers surviving poison. But Douglas is writing in 1911. He isn't satisfied with just folklore.
No, he needs the science.
He wants the science.
Right.
And this leads us to the absolute core of the book, the Mechnikov theory.
This is the pivot point where the book goes from a travelogue to a medical text. Professor Elie Mechnikov, who was the director of the Pasteur Institute, is the intellectual giant looming over this whole discussion.
Right. He was a Nobel laureate, a big deal.
A very big deal. And he was trying to solve the problem of senility of old age.
And he had a villain in his story.
The villain was autointoxication.
Autointoxication, self-poisoning.
Basically, yes. Mechnikov's theory was that we are rotting from the inside out. He believed that the large intestine in humans is essentially a defective organ.
A defective organ.
He looked at it as a reservoir for waste. A sewer, basically.
A sewer that holds on to material for too long.
For far too long. And because it holds on to it, the putrefactive microbes, the bad bacteria, have a field day.
They start to break things down.
They decompose the food residues, particularly meat. And in that process, they create toxins. Poisons like phenols and indoles. And the body, being a sponge, absorbs those poisons through the intestinal wall.
So the theory is, you eat, the food rocks in your gut. The rot produces poison. The poison slowly breaks down your body. And that is what we call aging.
Precisely. It leads to the hardening of arteries, the graying of hair, the stiffening of joint senility. It's a very mechanical view of the body. The machine is getting clogged with its own waste products.
So if autointoxication is the villain, who is the hero?
The hero is a tiny microscopic warrior called Bacillus bulgaricus.
The bacillus of long life.
That's the one. The strategy is biological warfare. Mechnikov and Douglas argue that you can't just wash the intestine out. That's not enough. You have to introduce a fighting microbe to displace the bad ones.
You have to change the population.
You have to change the entire ecosystem in there.
But why this specific bacillus? Why Bacillus bulgaricus?
Yeah.
There are lots of bacteria in milk, right?
There are, but Douglas gets into the specific bacteriology here. He explains that Bacillus bulgaricus is a heavyweight champion of acid production. It produces a very, very high amount of lactic acid, up to 2.5% or more.
And acid is bad for the rot bacteria.
Putrefactive bacteria generally hate acid. They thrive in neutral or alkaline environments. That's why meat rots. It's not acidic. So if you can flood the colon with lactic acid, you basically make it uninhabitable for the bad germs.
You starve them out and kill them.
Right. But there's another reason Bacillus bulgaricus is the hero. It is tough.
Tough out.
It survives heat. Many lactic bacteria die at body temperature, or blood heat, as Douglas calls it.
Right, around 98.6 Fahrenheit.
But Bacillus bulgaricus originates from warm climates. It thrives at higher temperatures. That means it can survive the journey through the acidic stomach, through the digestive tract, and actually set up shop in the colon where it needs to do its work.
So it's an invasive species, but a good one. It moves in, cranks up the heat, cranks up the acid, and kicks out the squatters that are killing you.
That is the survival of the fittest in the gut that Douglas describes. He views the gut as a battlefield, and he wants to give you the superior army.
This brings us to section 4 of our deep dive, the chemistry and the bacteriology. Because Douglas isn't just telling us to eat yogurt, he wants us to understand what is happening under the microscope.
He dives deep into the composition of milk itself. He breaks it down: water, fat, casein, sugar, ash. But the star of the show for him is the milk sugar lactose.
Lactose is the fuel.
It's the fuel for the revolution. The bacteria eat the lactose and convert it into lactic acid. That is the alchemy.
And he describes what this hero bacillus looks like. He calls it the granule bacillus.
Yes. He describes looking at it under the microscope stained with methylene blue. He sees long rods with internal granules, and he's very, very careful to distinguish this from the yeasts found in kumis or kefir.
Right, because those create alcohol.
Those create alcohol. And Douglas emphasizes that for the true health benefit, for the longevity, you want the lactic fermentation, not the alcoholic one. He wants the acid factory, not the brewery, in your gut.
Which brings us to the practical side. In 1911, you couldn't just walk into a supermarket and buy a tub of probiotics. You had to make it.
And this is where the book becomes a fascinating manual for the early 20th century biohacker. He talks about the Maya or zakvaska, the starter culture used in Bulgaria.
The mother, essentially.
Yes. And the process he describes is rigorous. First, you boil the milk. Why?
To kill the wild germs, you want a blank slate.
Exactly. Then, and this is critical, you cool it to about 100 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit.
Blood heat.
Blood heat. If it's too hot, you kill the starter. If it's too cold, the Bacillus bulgaricus won't wake up and do its work. Then you inoculate it, and you have to keep it warm for 8 to 10 hours.
And this is where we get to the gadgets. I love the descriptions of the apparatuses available in 1911.
They are wonderful, aren't they? He describes insulated boxes with hot water vessels to maintain the temperature. He talks about lactobators, which are incubators specifically for milk.
Lactobators, that's a great name.
Some even used night lights, little candles underneath to keep the temperature steady.
It sounds like a science experiment in your kitchen. Candlelit yogurt.
It was bringing the Pasteur Institute into the home pantry, and he warns people about shortcuts.
Oh, the fake cultures, of course.
Even in 1911, there were snake oil salesmen. Douglas warns against fake cultures sold as chocolates or sweets.
Probiotic candy.
Exactly. He says they don't contain enough active germs to establish themselves in the gut. He says they're basically useless. You need the living, thriving culture in the milk.
So let's say you get your lactobator, you get your Maya culture, you make your sour milk. What happens? What does Douglas say are the medical applications? This is Section 5.
Well, beyond just living to 126, he lists a whole host of specific ailments. He talks about biliousness.
A classic old-timey disease.
A very old-timey disease. Also nervous fatigue, and get this, misery and depression of spirits.
Depression. That's really interesting. We are just now, in the 21st century, talking about the gut-brain axis and how gut health affects mood.
I know.
And Douglas was talking about this in 1911.
It is remarkably prescient. He links the toxicity of the gut to the state of the mind. I mean, it makes sense. If you're poisoning yourself, of course you feel miserable.
Sure.
He also mentions enlargement of the liver and anemia. The logic is consistent with the theory. The liver and kidneys are the body's filters. If you have a sewer in your gut leaking poison, the liver and kidneys have to work overtime to clean it up. They get exhausted.
And the sour milk stops the poison at the source.
It lightens the load on these organs. That is the core medical argument.
But he also suggests a lifestyle overhaul. It's not just add yogurt. You have to subtract things, too.
And this is the hard part for the Western eater. Douglas suggests reducing butcher's meat and alcohol.
The two things the West loves most.
Exactly. Meat puts more putrefactive material into the gut. Alcohol damages the organs, so he says. Substitute fish, eggs, and crucially soured milk.
How much sour milk?
He suggests half a pint to a pint daily. And he says you can take it with sugar or fruit because, and this is a nice detail, the bacteria love sugar. It helps them thrive. So a little jam in your yogurt is actually a good thing, according to Douglas.
That's good to know. I noticed there is a section where he addresses a controversy, the profit controversy. It seems some people were skeptical because dairymen were making money off this trend.
It is the eternal cynicism toward the wellness industry, even back then. People argued that because dairymen profited from selling sour milk, the health benefits must be a scam.
Right. They're just trying to sell you something.
But Douglas argues that profit doesn't negate the science. Just because a dairyman makes a living doesn't mean the Bacillus bulgaricus isn't killing the bad germs in your gut. He's very pragmatic about it.
So we have walked through the history, the chemistry, the biology, and the medical claims. What does this all mean for us at the end of the day?
If we synthesize the argument Douglas is making, it is a very clear logical chain. Western diets, high in meat, low in ferments, lead to intestinal putrefaction.
The rot.
The rot. That putrefaction leads to auto-intoxication, self-poisoning. And that poisoning leads to premature senility and death.
It is a grim picture.
It is. But the solution is optimistic. It is biological warfare in the gut. You introduce the Bacillus bulgaricus, you acidify the gut, you stop the rot, and potentially you double your active lifespan.
That is the promise. There's this final provocative thought that Douglas leaves us with. It's something I've been mulling over since I read the text.
Yeah.
He suggests that the human organism is by no means perfect.
It really challenges the idea that nature made us perfect, doesn't it? He explicitly calls the large intestine a defective organ, a flaw in our design.
That is such a heavy concept. We usually think of the body as this miracle of engineering. But Douglas and Metchnikoff are saying, no, there is a design flaw in the plumbing.
And that flaw is killing us. But, and here's the hopeful part, we have the intelligence to fix it. We can use science, and we can use nature, specifically this little bacteria, to patch the software, so to speak.
So if a simple dietary change could neutralize a fundamental biological flaw, If it could take us from dying at 70 to hiking mountains at 101 like Tudor, it forces you to ask, is the modern diet completely backward?
It certainly suggests we have drifted very, very far from the biological inputs our bodies actually need to function long term. We sterilized our food, and in doing so, we might have disarmed our internal defense system.
It makes you look at a container of yogurt a little differently, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not just a snack. It's a weapon against time.
It's a regiment of tiny soldiers waiting to fight for your longevity.
I think that is the perfect place to leave it. Next time you are in the dairy aisle, think of Baba Vasilka, think of the passive Bukova, and think of the unseen world in your food. Thanks for diving deep with us.
A pleasure. Stay curious.
So were they wrong? 100 years ago, people truly believed they had found the secret to long life. Not in a pill, not in technology, but in something simple, living bacteria. They didn't have modern science. They didn't have DNA sequencing. But they asked the same question we ask today. Why do we age? And can we slow it down? Maybe they were naive. Maybe they were hopeful. Or maybe they were onto something. Because even now, we're still discovering how deeply our gut, our food, and our microbes shape our health, and possibly our future. So the real question isn't whether fermented milk could make you live to 120. The question is, what secrets are we believing in today that might look crazy 100 years from now? This was Podkast, a 100-year-old secret to long life.